Badger fans excited for this one. We finally got that guy on the show. I am stoked for it. We're going to talk recruiting, the 24 class, visitors in the 25 class, Luke Fickell staff, all that and more on today's Locked On Badgers. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers. Thank you for making this one of your first listens every single day. Really do appreciate it as we build this community. We have a great guest today. First, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. We always say we want people on the show that make us smarter. We got that guy, Clint Cosgrove, recruiting guru, former coach, former scout, former player. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, Ryan, I'm excited to be here, man. I've always wanted to come on, just never got the invite. And now I am here, living the dream, ready to talk ball. Appreciate you having me on, man.
No, I can't wait, man. It's a blast. And we talked a little before the show, and by little, I mean like 30 minutes before the show. But I had mentioned to some people, hey, I might be able to get Clint on the show. I got a lot of questions, so I just kind of want to lead up there. Questions from the community. I'm going to start off with this guy named JB who submitted 27 questions for you to answer. We're going to take 2 of them.
What up, JB?
I apologize, JB. We're only going to get to 2 of yours, but he said, how do you feel about Luke Fickell heading into year 2?
I feel pretty good about it. Wisconsin is a program that has had, consistency over the years. And that's part of what's made Wisconsin great is they've been consistent. They've been in the same mold. But at the same time, over time, without a lot of change, without a lot of, not even philosophical, but just, the recruiting footprint, the doing things, the way they've really been done since Coach Alvarez is there. There's a built-in culture and feeling of the program. So when someone from the outside comes in, I don't care if it's Lou Holtz or Fickell, there's going to be an adjustment period. And I think it shocked a lot of people because Fickell's had so much success that they didn't come in and they just didn't dominate right away. Well, you're working with a new offense. You're working with a totally new defense. It was a polar opposite change in many ways. Now, Wisconsin football, the principles, the smart, the toughness, the dependability, the physicalness, whatever it may be, those core principles stayed, but a lot changed in terms of, scheme, the players needed for that scheme. And then, the culture had been so deep ingrained that any change is going to get a little pushback. So I think, people thought it would be a little easier year 1, but I think year 2 is really where you're gonna start to see the things that you hoped for year 1 as a fan, because we all do as fans. We think everything's going to be great and fall into place. I think year 2 is really where you see your biggest jump from year 1 to year 2, without question. Now you've got some players in place. With the transfer portal, they were able to go and get some immediate impact players at positions of immediate need, especially with the scheme change at linebacker on defense. And then, so you're going to have a nice mix of transfers, young guys who are getting used to the Fickell way. And then, some young guys who might come in and have a chance to make some noise early. So I really like what they have going into year 2. The schedule isn't going to be the easiest at all times. But I think year 2 is where you really see, getting comfortable with the system, feeling comfortable with the coach that's coaching you, and with the change that has occurred over the past year plus. And I really think, year 2, you're going to see a little more of a statement. There's going to be a little more of Fickell's maybe brand on the ball that we see on Saturdays.
Let me ask you this. Is it possible? So there's a narrative right now where we got let down last year. I got so excited. I'm not going to fall for that trap this year. I almost feel like the pendulum has swung too far, right? Now people are like, I'm not going to believe anything I read in practice. I was disappointed by Mordecai. The greatest receiver room ever wasn't there. I feel like people are underselling how good this could be in year 2, potentially.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And I think you'd rather have that. You would rather outperform expectations that may have not been as high as they should have been than have a year like last year, where if they didn't win 10, 11 games, it didn't matter. It was going to be considered an underperformance. I think maybe the outlook that the fans have right now is probably what they should have had going into year 1. And there wouldn't have been as much. I mean, because it wasn't the season that they dreamed of, but they still end up playing LSU in a bowl game, right? They show that they're competitive. And people forget, year one with the quarterback. And not only that, he gets hurt. You see Mordecai in the bowl game, totally different player. And so, and that's under less than 1 year under Phil Longo. And we're going to have another new quarterback this year, that's going to have 1 year. But I think as these young guys develop and get used to the system, I think there's going to be drastic improvement, but temper your expectations. I think that's where everybody needs to be, because I think they were a little too high last year. And as a coach and player, I think sometimes when people are a little quiet about the program, I remember back in the day when I would interview my dad before each season. I'd be like, how many wins this year? Like, I'm in grade school, collecting newspaper clippings. And I remember the 1 year going into 93 was the year he was kind of the quietest. He's like, yeah, we've got a chance. People thought they could be pretty good. And then, but you didn't expect 10-1-1 in a Rose Bowl. So I think these are the types of years, types of seasons where you kind of had these tempered expectations, kind of wondering, did everything go the way it should have when we made the hire? You have people questioning you. And this is where you really, as a team, group together and bond and say, okay, I like this. People are kind of questioning us, kind of doubting us. And then I think that's when a team can really gel under a new coach. And, I'm not saying they're going to the national championship, but I do think they put a stamp on year 2. We see drastic improvement. We see a little more gelling. And I do think this is what you like as a team and as a coach.
I absolutely love it. I always wonder, and not to linger too much on this one question, you and I are going to spend an entire show just on one question. I almost wonder, you could reframe this and say first year staff, all new players, new coaching staff, not all new players, but they're in a new conference and they still went 7-5, went to a bowl game, won the Axe. You could almost frame that as a success in some way if you didn't go into the season with the level of expectations that you had.
No question. And then, I mean, as banged up as they got, like, people don't realize, and especially when you're making a schematic change, you don't necessarily, your depth's already limited because you don't all have all of the bodies that fit into these schematic changes. So I would say that they were on par. They lost some games that they probably shouldn't have. They won some games that maybe they shouldn't have as well. And so I do think that it's always an interesting concept, change, and there's so much psychology that goes into all of this. And but yeah, no, I would agree on that.
All right, let's get some of these other questions here. This is from Zach over on our Locked On Insider group. Love Clint to start with.
Love you too, man.
Just wanted to get thoughts, opinions on new stuff. What do you think of the 25 class so far? And this is actually one question I had for you as well. How do you feel like this 2025 class, which is obviously not complete yet, is maybe stacking up in year 2 for Fickell?
Yeah, I mean, I really like, one of the things that really impressed me with the 24 class is, people like to pick at everything. So they're like, okay, you didn't land all the in-state kids. Okay. Well, we don't know what all of the kids in state were a good fit for the program. We don't know all of those things, but what they did, even though they lost some talented kids in state, and we've Owen in 2025 as well, they went out and showed that they can recruit nationally to make up for that. So to me, that's a statement because, all right, maybe it's not the old school where you can build a wall around the state, but if you can keep some of those top players that maybe didn't go to Wisconsin this year, and you've already shown that you can walk in and take top players from another state, I think that bodes very well for the staff's ability to recruit moving forward, because then all of a sudden you end up with a year with 3-4 4-star kids in state, and you land 2-3 of them, and then you're recruiting nationally the way you were. I've always been impressed with these guys' ability to recruit since back when they were at Cincinnati. I know Maximus very well. I love the way he thinks. I love the way the staff evaluates. They trust their evaluations. They're very pinpoint in how they go about their recruitment. And so that's just going to bode well over time. There's going to be ebbs and flows. You're not always going to have the top 10 class, but this is a staff that can land a top 10 class at a place like Wisconsin. Now, right now, you look at, Cameron Miller, kid that we'll talk about, I think, in a little bit. He's a kid that I liked when we were out at Jersey, had him at a camp out there. Jameer Scott out of Ohio, I think he's got a chance to be very special. Cooper Catalano, in-state kid, So I really like the makeup of the class so far. And it's only going to get better. Some of these, especially nowadays, these big time kids, they're not making a decision till very late. And I'm saying that even if they're committed right now, they're not making their decision until very late. But I like the early makeup of the class. They've got a lot of commits for this early. I know the recruiting, cycle has sped up, obviously, but to have 11 kids already, that says a lot. They're at top 25 probably across the board class wise. A lot of that, I think, is because of the amount of kids that they have committed right now. But I think this class is only going to get better. Some of the names we probably see in the group right now might not be there in the end, but there's going to be some guys that are not on this list that are probably going to wow some people, because the one thing that this staff does is they are very good at developing relationships, identifying what they want, going after it, and then landing it. And I think Wisconsin's about to see, it's probably, and this is a projection, this is based off my feeling, my understanding, what I know from inside and outside the program. I think we're going to see a run of recruiting that you haven't necessarily seen in the past at Wisconsin. So I think there's a lot to be excited about. There might not be that 5-star in there right now, but yeah, I like the makeup. It fits schematically. I really like that about it. With the linebackers and the DBs, the length, the athletes. So I think there's a lot to be excited about, and it's only going to get better.
Man, this is phenomenal already. Badger fans are getting excited. We're going to take one quick break for our friends of the show. Come back with Clint, continue talking your questions, plus the 2024 Class 25 class that's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick break for our friends of the show over at Yahoo Finance. Yahoo Finance is the number one spot if you want to get a little bit smarter with your financial information. They give me a dashboard, right? Like, I have a lot in my brain, and it's hard for me to figure it all out. I've told you once before, I floated an idea to my wife called the Everything Cupboard, which just has everything in the kitchen. I don't have to find where the snacks are and the Pop-Tarts and the salt. It's just all in one spot. I don't know. That's what Yahoo Finance does for me for financial stuff. It puts all my stuff in one spot, plus editorial content. You're not going to find a better place to stay on top of the markets, on top of investing, on top of real estate. It's all there. Behind every great investor is Yahoo Finance. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com, the number one financial destination. yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. All right, let's get Clint back on here. By the way, if it looks like I'm hot, it's because I turned the AC off and my barn heats up like an oven. But I've said it before, it's like Hunter Wooler. We don't miss reps on this show. We just power through. Let me ask you this, because you hit on this point. Length and athleticism, you said, it fits the prototype they're looking for with the 25 class. We did have a question for Xavier Lucas. He's a 2024 kid who recently ran a 10.4 100. This is from White Marlin. Thoughts on Xavier Lucas, given recent track times, length and athleticism in general?
Yeah, so Xavier's one of the guys that I really liked in the class. When I was doing my recap and my evals and watching the film, and that was before he ran, sub 10.5 in the 100. So I'm a track nerd. Is right. I mean, like, if you already liked a kid without knowing this special trait that he has, and people don't realize how fast you are if you're running sub 10.5. Like, you are rolling, and it's not considered world class because there are kids who specialize and run that fast, but it's national class. At least you are a top athlete in the entire nation if you're running 10.5. Now, a lot of track guys, they struggle with lateral movement. They're not always football guys. Xavier is a track guy that is let me put it this way. He is a football player that runs track.
Yeah.
So you've got a dude who can flat out play ball. I mean, and then you put his physical size, talk about that length and that size, and then the ability, the hips, I study body mechanics for a living. I tell people a lot of the time when I don't want to get too detailed, but his body mechanics, his ability to flip his hips, his ability to come out of breaks, just the natural instincts he has in man coverage, the range he has in zone coverage. And then you add in that, not world class, but pretty close to its speed. That jumps off the charts to me because I already loved him before that. I think I knew he was fast. I didn't know he was that fast. And you don't have a lot of 6'1", 6'2" corners that are also running that type of speed. Corners are usually, quicker guys. They're really good in a confined space. They're trying to stay on the hip of a receiver. They're moving backwards. There's so many different traits that take, that are required to be a great defensive back. One of them is reacting to the guy in front of you. You are literally going backwards with a guy running full speed forwards who is reading and knows where he is going, and you've got to find a way to cover them. And a guy with the speed like that and the length that he has, you just have to love, because he is a natural cover guy. Now, when you have that speed and when you have that size, and you're going to be put on an island in the 3-3-5 defense, just because the way things are, those safeties have some run responsibilities. Sometimes you're going to be put on an island, and you got to be very careful. A guy with his length and that makeup speed, then you can start taking chances.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now, it might not always end up the best, but if you take a chance and then it ends up being a deep ball, you've got time and distance to make up when you have that type of speed. If you don't have the makeup speed and the length, you're not able to take those type of chances. So what you get then is a guy who might trigger quick and make big tackles. You got a guy who can maybe jump in front of the football, like you see on his high school film. He sees the field very well. You got a guy who can play zone. I mean, he's a big physical corner that can run. It's what you see in the NFL. It's really what you see in the NFL. He has a future NFL body type. He is so long. He's far from filled out, even though he probably weighs, 195 pounds or so? Yeah.
Exactly.
And so this kid is pure upside, because if you liked him before he ran track, you're going to like him a lot more now. It might take some time. It's hard. It's hard as a corner, adjusting, playing some press against some dudes who can body you, who can run the same speed as you. But everything that I've seen from him, then you add in the track times, I just think he's got a chance to be a special player, and he might be a gem that I don't want to say overlooked, because he's a pretty highly rated kid, but like, he could end up being a little gem that maybe was overlooked by all of the national powers. I know Miami maybe made a run at him late, and some of the bigger name schools, and he had an impressive offer list, but he could end up being a special corner for Wisconsin, I think.
Well, what's really interesting? I think that's beautifully well said with the physical tools, but then you factor in some of the intangible stuff too, right? Played at American Heritage,
Yep.
Playing elite type of competition. His dad was a college cornerback, right? He used to bring him to the beach and do combat workouts in combat boots in the sand. And I had a chance to have him on the show. Really well spoken, really cares about the game. So you have these physical attributes, the intangibles, level of competition. Miami was after him, so you have quality of offers. It feels like you're hitting every silo, whereas previously Wisconsin would maybe get a guy that's fast, but it'd be because he was from Utah and didn't play anybody.
Yep.
Right. I'm not. That's not a knock on anybody. It just feels like across the board, this is who you're looking for.
Yeah, he checks every box. You're 100%. And you look at these guys like the corner that got drafted from Toledo this past year. These guys end up at sometimes a smaller school than they would have, because they're missing that one elite trait. Xavier, as far as I'm concerned, where's the elite trait we're missing? You talk about the mental, the love of the game. If he's out there in combat boots working out on a beach, nobody wants to do that unless they love what they're doing. And they're going to get, like you said before the show, they're going to burn out if they don't love it. Well, this kid loves it. So if you want to put in the work, and you've got the God-given ability, and you've got the football instincts, and you come from the son of a corner, I don't know. There's a lot to like here. Checks all the boxes. And these are the types of players that Wisconsin's recruiting. They identify these guys early. And some of these guys, I have talks with Maximus. They're not afraid to go after a kid that doesn't necessarily have the offer list that they're going to have. They're not afraid to be first. They're going to go in there. They're going to create a relationship, and they're going to fight their butts off to the end to get him. I think this is a great example of that. And he is a kid who checks all of the boxes. And a lot of times, if you check all the boxes, you're going to one of three programs. So I think it bodes well for Wisconsin and the recruiting efforts, obviously.
Love it. Next question here from Kyle Maitrey. What's the biggest position group holding the Badgers back? If they're going to get to the playoffs, and maybe better, it's easier to get to the playoffs now, contend in the playoffs, win a round or two. What's the biggest position that's going to hold them back?
Well, when my dad was at LSU, and the only reason I bring this up, what year was that when they won the national championship? 2022? No, God.
Is it 21 or 22?
think it was 21, 2019. I don't even know. Well,
Just
that being said, I went down there for spring ball, and I would sit in on the meetings, and they did a study where they broke it down to a point where they said there's 8 teams in the nation that have a chance, that have the roster to win a national championship. They were able to identify the 8 teams based off their roster makeup, what they had coming back, their depth and everything. And they said they have 8 teams that are capable of winning a national championship. And I don't know what all the criteria was for that, because 4 of them made it to the playoff. So they were doing something right. So I'm going to talk with the guy who did it, and I want to know kind of what the criteria was, because then I could give a very scientific answer on this. But I think the one thing that you have with any national championship team is you have a great quarterback. Does Wisconsin have a great quarterback right now? We don't know. We have a guy who could be a great quarterback. We have a guy who has been very productive and played at a high level and shown that he's willing to do the things and take the risks and has the arm talent and has the athleticism that people question to be a great quarterback. Okay. Then does he fit in the system? So I think number one, you got to have a great quarterback. Does that happen? We don't know yet. You got 1 year with them. You're going to find out pretty quickly, probably. But you got to have a great quarterback. 2, the offensive line play. Offensive line has to be great. There is not a team that wins a national championship that has a below average offensive line. Okay. You can do some patchwork stuff. You can do some schematic things. You can try to take things off their back. But at the end of the day, you have to have a great offensive line to win a national championship. Is Wisconsin going to have a great offensive line this year? I don't know. Then you got to be able to run the ball. And that isn't necessarily nowadays. It's not necessarily one player. And I think the running back room is going to end up being pretty good. Now you look at it and you're like, we lose Braylon Allen. He's been the workhorse, but you got some good young guys. You've got guys with experience. And I think as a group, they're going to be really good. All right. And then every single team that wins a national championship, I feel like they have a difference maker who can take a game over at receiver. A Marvin Harrison Jr., a Jamar Chase. Now, if you've got a group of them, awesome. But they have that one guy when you're going into the game as a defensive coordinator that you have to account for at all times. And what does that do? It does more than just, if you're worried about taking out a receiver and you know that you don't have a guy who can battle him one-on-one. Now, if you do, and you're willing to take those shots and take those chances, I mean, you give yourself a chance. But like, when you have to account for a great receiver who can take over a game, people don't realize that's changing your run fits. That's changing your pressure calls. That's changing everything. You might have to have a safety over a guy the entire game. And then all of a sudden you can never do kind of like a quarters look or a cover 3 kind of, get an extra guy in the box to fill, because you can't be left on an island with a Jamar Chase. You know what I mean? And so I think it's important to have a great receiver. And then the other thing is, I don't care how good your offense is. You got to have a great defense, and you got to have a pass rush. I do think it's one in the trenches, but you got to have pass rushers. You got to play defense. You've got to be physical. You've got to strike a little fear into your opponent, not your component. So it's hard for me to say what they're lacking. I haven't been to practice in a while. I don't know exactly what they have in-house, but I know those are the things you need to compete for a playoff spot. And so if they're going to play physical ball, if they're going to play with great fundamentals, I don't know if you have a Heisman Trophy candidate type quarterback. I don't know that yet. Do they have a Jamar Chase type or a Marvin Harrison Jr. type receiver? I don't know. I like what I've seen. I think as a group, as a collective, I think they got a chance to be pretty good. So I don't know if they're necessarily right there to be in that playoff spot, but those things I just talked about, I think when you have all of that combined, that's when you put yourself in contention. And like I said, there's probably 8 to 10 teams who have a roster that can actually contend for a national championship. So I know that's kind of dancing around the answer, but at the same time, I really can't tell you. I know that those are the things that you have to compete. And the question is, does Wisconsin have those right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's truthful, right? And I like where you went with the trenches because traditionally that's where Wisconsin has done well. I think it's that receiver one where Wisconsin has really struggled finding that guy. And you mentioned the defensive pressure that puts on, but offensively, what does it do, right? It opens up the route tree for your receiver to a number 3 because now they're not facing that safety. It creates a safety valve for your quarterback, right? It creates an outlet against pass rush. It changes everything offensively too to have that alpha guy on the edge. And I don't know if they've got it, right? And I feel like that might still be their biggest hurdle that they're searching for. I as well. I like the group. We're going to come back, take one more quick break. So much we're getting into here with Clint. It's awesome stuff. One more quick break for our friends at the show. Then we're going to come back and ask him when he's joining the Badgers coaching staff. That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. We're also getting into some 25 visitors that are coming up. Coming up next on Locked On Badgers with Clint Cosgrove. Really excited to have him on the show. Today's episode brought to you by our great friends over at FanDuel. FanDuel is the number one source for all your sports betting needs. That's where we go. That's where I go listen, I'm not good at betting. So when I go, that's where I go to lose money. I'll just say it. Other smarter people go there and they win money, right? So FanDuel is the easiest way to do it. FanDuel.com/lockedon. I bet with my heart. But if you want the best sportsbook experience, that's over at FanDuel. Futures, parlay, spreads, teasers, baseball's in full swing. You know I'm a huge baseball fan. I'm a Braves guy, so I'm sure I'm going to bet on them to win the World Series again, which I'm sure they won't. It is what it is. NBA Finals coming up. That's another great place to do this. FanDuel.com/lockedon. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make your sports weekends, your sports evenings a little more excited. Please do it responsibly. But FanDuel.com/lockedon. All right, let's get Clint back in. You're a baseball guy, right?
I was at the Braves-Cubs game last night.
4-3.
Walk off. Hey, that was a game. I'm telling you, that Atlanta team, man, you got a lot to be excited about. Their defense is ridiculous. That Michael Harris or whatever at center field, that guy is a playmaker. I don't care if he would go 0 for the season batting. That dude saved 3 runs with his glove. Ozuna out there, man. Not to go on too much of a tangent, but yeah, no, we had great seats and it was a walk-off, big Cubs victory. But yeah, no, it was. I'm a baseball guy. My grandpa played for the St. Louis Browns, actually. He was a Major League Baseball player. So, yeah.
Well, you might have to do a baseball split off at some point. Nobody here, I've gotten a bad review before. It's like, Ryan, stop talking about your other teams. Nobody cares. So, which is true. Listen, I get it. But yeah, I'm a big baseball guy right there with you. Let's talk, let's jump back to the 25 class quick and then get into some future visitors. I'm going to try not to take your entire day. Who in the 25 class is the most slept on, the person that you look at and you're like, I think people need to talk about this guy more that they've committed so far?
In 25, geez, I don't know if I'm going to be the best person to answer this question because I've been on a little sabbatical. I talked about really liking Jameer Scott, but he's a highly rated kid. Cooper Catalano, I've been following him since he was a freshman. So I feel like we know a lot about him. He's your true and through Wisconsin football player. The quarterback from Texas, I like him. He's got a little something to him. I don't know a ton about him. He's got a little cowboy to him, so I like that. Is he the brother of somebody?
He's the brother of Braden Locke, the quarterback.
Yeah. I'm an idiot. See,
no, okay.
Sometimes you bring in guys who aren't smarter than you to talk a little ball. But yeah, I don't know. I like the kid from Minnesota. I haven't done a deep enough dive on this class necessarily to say, who's my favorite, who's the most slept on. Although I will say Jameer Scott's probably my favorite so far. And I think my old ranking reflects that. But yeah, I think it's solid, and I would be lying if I could give you a deep breakdown on each kid. The Roski kid, he's developed a ton. He's huge. I like the makeup, but if I had to choose one player right now, it'd be Jameer Scott. I don't know who I'd say is most slept on. But Cameron Miller, he's a kid that he played defensive back when we had him out at camp at 2 years ago, year and a half ago. It would be a year ago in New Jersey. I liked him as a defensive back, and then he comes out and puts out huge numbers as a receiver, as a junior, and he kind of fits that Longo air raid mold. I know he's listed as an athlete at most places, I believe, because he is a true athlete. But yeah, I don't know. I don't want to ramble, but I probably can't answer the question as good as you'd like me to. I need to do a little deeper dive on that probably.
No, you gave us names though. And Justin Joko listens to the show sometimes, loves Scott. So he'll like your answer there. I actually think Locke is maybe sometimes when a guy commits early, right? Locke committed really early.
Yep.
People just tend to forget about it. But here's a 6A Texas quarterback who is a bigger version of a 4-star quarterback that Mike Leach recruited in Braden Locke and then Longo wanted. I think coming from a Texas kind of powerhouse, I think there's something there that people are just because it happened so long ago. The commitment happened so long ago.
People forget about it. They forget about it. And even like when you look at these rankings, like depending on how the companies do their rankings, like once a kid commits early and they're not really looking at them a bunch, and if other teams aren't coming and recruiting them, you're like, oh, then they're probably where they should be. There's so many kids. And so sometimes that's in the best interest of a program like Wisconsin. But yeah, no, I remember when he committed that I really liked him, and I was shocked that he wasn't more coveted, especially being from a big time program in Texas. There's a lot to like about those guys, those Texas quarterbacks. You worry about it, some positions down there, I think, being maxed out because they've been playing in the same system since they're in like middle school, and they've been lifting in the same program and all this. But like quarterbacks, there's a lot of high IQ quarterbacks who can compete at a very high level in Texas. So you always like that. And it looks like there's going to be a little Texas pipeline to Wisconsin for quarterbacks, maybe. So
let me ask you about a theory I have with this one. And you tell me if I'm crazy, because you've been around this a lot more than I have. So they have the older brother on the roster, Braden Locke, right? They really like him. They got him from to transfer in from Mississippi State, former 4-star kid. I don't think you go and get the younger brother unless you love the intangibles of the older brother.
No question. No question. If you did not like the older brother, well, one, he probably wouldn't be on the roster anymore. But you definitely don't recruit the younger one. You know exactly what you're getting. And I think that says a lot about Braden as well. So the family, the kid, you knew him before you were recruiting him, really, because when you're recruiting a kid, you're recruiting their family. So you start getting to know at least the great recruiters, that's a family relationship. And you get to know that family inside and out. And then when they're in your program, you're forced to know that family inside and out, especially if a kid's, off the beaten path every now and then, and it takes some time to adjust. You're probably in contact with that family more than you'd like. But I think that says a lot. They know what they're getting, and they wouldn't go for it if they didn't feel confident in what they're getting and decide he was the guy early on.
Let me get into this one. And this is a great segue you made earlier. This is from White Marlin. He has a little bit, just in general thoughts, as deep or as shallow as you want to go on this, recruiting rankings on websites versus how the coaching staff does their boards. This is a much, as you know, discussed topic through every fan base. But just in general, maybe a way to frame this is, where do fans maybe have misperceptions with this, and where are fans maybe correct on how they look at this stuff?
Well, it's a crapshoot. People don't really, it's crazy. I'm somewhat of a star skeptic. I also think there's a lot to be said about the star process. I don't know how 24/7 does it. I don't know how On3 does it. I know how we did it at Rivals. I think there's some tweaks that could be made. And I think there's some things that I'll just kind of leave it up to the imagination. I think too much emphasis is put on probably, okay, are they a first round draft pick? And that's the only way they can be a 5-star, or position value. So what are we ranking them for? Are we ranking them for where they get drafted? Or are we ranking them for how good they're going to be as a college football player? I know as a college football coach, you're recruiting for the level you're playing. Yeah, you want guys who are going to be NFL players. And that's why you see length and all this stuff take over. The players are just bigger, longer, faster. So you're looking for the same things that the NFL players are, that the NFL teams are. But I think the college boards are much different because they are looking for a player that fits what they are doing, that fits their culture, that fits their scheme, that fits maybe their weight program. Like, we can develop this kid a different way than somebody else can. Whereas the rankings with the recruiting companies, it's, 5-star is supposed to be a first rounder, and that's how they're judged. So I get that's why they do it. But I think a little too much of the ranking system gets caught up in that. And there's a lot of favoritism that goes into it. A football staff, for instance, they're not going to recruit a kid that, might have character issues that aren't taken into consideration when doing a rivals rankings or a 24/7 rankings. Now, we try to consider those things. We really do. If a kid's going to be a problem and have trouble staying in school or staying out of trouble, you tend to go a little lower with those kids, even if they're very, very talented, because they're either going to be a star or they're going to flame out and you're never going to hear from them again. So recruiting rankings, if you think about this, these kids are getting ranked when they're 16 years old, 15 years old, sometimes 14 years old, depending on, what class they are in, how old they are, whatever it may be. And then you look at the draft and the stars and all that stuff, and you're like, NFL teams can't get first round draft picks right on a regular basis. Yet at the age of 14, 15, 16, a recruiting site is able to project a kid's level of success with depends on your opinion, but with a pretty high level of accuracy. Now, it's not perfect. Kids grow. There's kids who get 3-4 inch growth spurts who, showed up at a walk-on tryout who end up at, first round draft picks. That's just how it is. So you're never going to be 100% right. I think we all know what a 5-star looks like. They're 6'5". They run as fast as a skill kid. They love football, and they're going to have a very good chance at being a first round draft pick. But they're never going to be perfect. I think, some years 24/7 is probably the best. Some years rivals is probably the best. Some years on 3. Then you have your composites. So I take stars with a grain of salt. I do think they are important because you look at the numbers. 3 stars, 4 stars, and 5 stars are picked to the NFL draft at a pretty high rate, but the coaching staffs are just looking at it differently. Now, there's coaches who recruit for stars because they want to win the Recruiter of the Year ranking, or they want to get their bonus, or whatever it may be. There's coaching staffs that politic for stars. There's a lot of stuff that goes on the back end. And so that's why I say sometimes they can be taken with a grain of salt. And it also depends on who's doing them. The rivals team doesn't have the same people doing them this year as they did last year. They lost a guy who knows a little bit about football. 24/7 has, I don't know if they have the same people doing them every year. I know On 3 has like 1 or 2 guys doing them. So it's a crapshoot. But at the end of the day, I think, most guys end up deservedly where they should be. But it's always going to be different than where the coaching staff has them, because the coaching staff they're trying to accomplish a goal with the player. They're not just trying to say, what is a kid's ceiling?
This is, by the way, fascinating to me. I could spend an entire show just on this topic, because instantly as you were talking, so many branches of this came in my brain. And I just want to hit one.
I ramble.
It's really good stuff, especially as someone who's been a fan of this forever, but has always had these questions. And I can't get all the branches in the show because otherwise I would keep you all day. And I still want to ask about a couple of players coming up on visits, but I do want to get to one. You mentioned, and this is something that is talked about a lot, coaching staffs don't recruit to stars. We have our own board. But to some degree, is that just because you can't recruit to stars at certain places? Maybe another way to put it is, I'll use Wisconsin for an example. Wisconsin's awesome, right? I love this recruiting staff, but they're not going to win a bunch of head-to-head battles with Bama, Ohio State. Schools. So is the recruiting board also a reflection of what you can get to some degree?
Depends on how you look at yourself as a recruiter and staff. I remember when I got to a school I was at, and they're like, if these 3 teams in the league are recruiting them, don't waste your time. I said, okay, well, I'm going to go and recruit the kids that those 3 teams are recruiting, because those are the teams that are constantly at the top of the conference. So those are the players that I want. And so they're not afraid. Wisconsin, I can tell you, they're not afraid to get in a recruiting battle with Alabama. In the past, they might have not done it. And that's no bash on the old staff. You also have to be very smart and use your resources, correctly. You don't want to just, go after every 5-star that Alabama's going off after and think that you're going to beat them head to head, and spend all your time on that and then be like, oh gosh, who's left? I'll just go and take the best MAC players. Like, you can't do that. It's a fascinating thing. I mean, you've got to me, it all goes back to relationships, and you've got to know what makes a player tick. Okay. What are their pain points? What are they looking for? Are they looking for a bag? Okay. Wisconsin's probably not going to be the place. Check them off the list. Okay. If you circle back around, things change, let us know. But if you're going to a place that's going to pay the highest, Wisconsin's not going to get them. Okay. Now, is the pain point the family, is from the Midwest? They want them close to home. All right. Okay. Well, that checks the box. We want them at a school that's a fantastic academic institution. Okay, that checks the box. So you start, as you study these kids, it starts with the film eval, and then you do the research, and then you develop the relationships, and you find the guys who you have a chance at least the good recruiters do. And then once you do that, you say, okay, we fit the pain points, or at least I can make him believe that he can succeed here. Then you can go head to head with anyone. And I truly believe that. Now, there's certain things that it doesn't matter. It's like, okay, I want to play for Nick Saban. Well, you're not going to do that anywhere now. But, if that's a pain point, if the head coach needs to be a famous coach and something like that, like, you're not going to win that battle every time. You got to find out who the decision maker is. Is mom making the decision? Well, we better find out what mom likes, because I can beat Alabama on mom. I might not be able to beat him on the kid, but mom's making the decision. So you got a lot of different things going on there. I know it sounds like I'm rambling. It's just there's so many variables. And you don't recruit for stars, but you do. But stars come after offers. And so it's like chicken and egg and development. And it's like there's all these different theories, and everybody has their own, or every staff at least, they have a recruiting philosophy. Some staffs are like, okay, if he has an offer from this school, I'm just not going to recruit him. I'm not going to waste the time. But then you have some recruiters who are like, oh, that just made the pot that much sweeter. I want to beat them. And I think your best recruiters are like that. So might we see Wisconsin with a 5-star that's not from Wisconsin? Yeah, I think we could at some point. It's the chicken and an egg. Did the stars come first? Did the stars, are they 5 because they are going to Alabama, or would they have been 5 if they were heading over here? So I don't know. I could get into star theory and recruiting philosophy at a pretty boring level for a very long time.
I don't think it'd be boring for this crowd, but we'll do that future show, hopefully, if I can get you back on.
I'd love to, man.
I'll say this, as you were talking, I'm like, this guy's going to be a cheat code in the new EA Sports College game. Like, you already got recruiting sliders set up. We are going to try to get you into our Locked On Badgers dynasty. So we're going to talk about that on a future day too. Let's really quick finish up here. And again, I am super appreciative of the time, man. Like, I'm
having a blast.
But I've already kept you a little longer than I normally keep people. Talk about a couple of these guys. We mentioned Cameron Miller. Okay.
Yep.
Badgers commit receiver. Listed as an athlete. He's coming in as a receiver. I wanted to ask you specifically, how would you tier him up when you compare him to maybe a Kyneberry Johnson, a Tretch Kekahuna? Are they all kind of in the same tier? Or are any of those type of players the guy that we referenced earlier that you think realistically could be an alpha on a really good team?
I don't know if Cameron Miller's, a Jamar Chase. I think he can be a Will Pauling. A very good player, very productive player. I think Tretch is going to be phenomenal. He fits that mold. I think, Kyneberry Johnson, like, even though the guys are similar players, they're going to line up in similar places and they're going to be asked to do similar things. They each have kind of a unique way of doing them. And that's what I like about the makeup of the receiver room, or at least what they're building right now. So like Cameron, he's a productive, slippery route runner. What are we seeing them bring in? Like guys like Kyneberry Johnson catch a ton of balls. Tretch, extremely productive. Guys who can run out of the slot, but also stretch the field horizontally and vertically. But like production seems to be the thing that really sticks out to these guys. Because when you're throwing a lot of passes and you're throwing a lot of high percentage passes, you got to have guys who can catch the ball, secure the ball, and get yards after the catch. That's what this offense does. It dishes and dimes, and that's why, a lot of people, Wisconsin fans, will say we still don't have that number one guy on the outside. And I know I talked about that being an absolute must, to be that national championship team. But collectively as a group, they find ways to get those things done. I remember in the bowl game seeing the switch routes, and they're still taking the top off vertically from the slot. So like there's ways to get those things done without having that big 6'5" guy on the outside. Now they have some guys coming in who can be that. But production seems to be key. So I think Cameron's a little different. He's not a blazer and he's not huge, but he's fast. He'll probably be a sub 1100 kid, but he had 57 catches for 1,334 yards and 15 touchdowns. Gotta love that. We had him at camp and he was a defensive back. So I loved his body mechanics. I thought he might end up being a corner. He's got, he had some SEC schools recruiting him. His yardage total this year, I read somewhere, I think it was like 7th all time in the state of New Jersey. That says a lot. You're not always playing in the greatest elements there. He's in the mold of these guys that we've seen in these past classes, these guys that are currently on the roster, but he brings his own unique flair. With Cayenne, it's catching insane balls and getting people to trip over their feet when they're covering them, making sure that any ball in his catch radius is there. With Tretch, it's like he's kind of slippery like Cameron. He's going to get open and he can do so many things with the ball in his hand, after the catch. So, I think we definitely see a common theme. Cameron's not necessarily a Jamar Chase, but you never know. Lee Evans wouldn't have ended up at Wisconsin if he was Lee Evans. Chris Chambers wouldn't have ended up at, Wisconsin. They did a great job evaluating and they found that number one guy. And within this group, I feel very confident in the group that they built over the last couple of years. There is going to be a guy who's an all Big Ten first team type, caliber receiver. And I think that says a lot.
I can't wait for that. It's been a minute. Nizyi Davis. Let's talk about the tight end. 6'6". I maybe mispronounced that first name. Full disclosure.
Couldn't tell you.
But about 6'6", long tight end, 215, 220 pounds, coming out of Indianapolis, Indiana. Long body. We'll try to get physical at the line of scrimmage. Like, you like to see that. He's not just going to run routes. What'd you think of watching him play?
I remember watching him early on. He had limited film, and I remember if I was talking to a college coach or something. I'm like, how is this kid not like a national recruit? And he's at a very raw stage. So like when I say national recruit, just usually when these kids start getting recruited young, and a kid like him with that frame, that 6'6" frame, and then you see the athleticism and you see the want to, but he's at a raw stage of his development. It takes some time to grow into a 6'6" body. I'm assuming he was more into basketball. I don't know that. But I'm assuming he was more into basketball when he was younger. So he's just kind of, growing into his own as a football player. And I'm a guy who's all about the upside and the body mechanics. And I see him growing into his frame and being able to do some special things. This is what, the Brock Bowers, the big time schools are playing with these physical, freaky tight ends. And to me, that is what he is. But he's a receiver. He could probably play defensive end. The kid can do a little bit of everything. And I think the reason that he's not that, 4-star caliber player yet, at least I don't think he is. I don't even know if all the sites have him rated, is because he's just at sorry, that's my dog, Juicy.
No worries.
He's at a very raw stage of his career, but I absolutely love the kid. I think he would be a slam dunk home run. Would love to see him play at Wisconsin. He's got a little Robert Booker when he was younger. Kind of reminds me of Robert when he was younger. He's had a great program in Indianapolis, so I really like that about him. I'm a big fan of him, and I might be a little too high on him because he's still at a raw stage of his career, like I said. But to me, those physical gifts, you can't teach that, and he's got the athleticism, and I just see so much upside there if it comes together.
Well, that's actually, it's funny. I watched this film today, and Booker was the first guy I thought of. I wrote it down, and much like Booker, right? Like, there's some things where like they round off their routes, right? They're not really crisp in certain areas, which they're high school kids. Like, it's fine. But the physical skill set is there. I actually think he's a little more physical than Booker, just from what I've seen. Like, I didn't see them in person. And then both of them have a similar thing where it feels like they should break a few more tackles in the open field. But I think that, right? Like,
it's easy to trip up those long legs, like, especially if, they're like, oh my God, I'm turning up. Like, I take 10 steps for every like 2 steps these 6'7" guys take, and so like, if those feet, you see them, you'll see defenders, they slap at the ankles, and, you try to catch up those feet. It's kind of like, you go and watch those like competitions where they're, roping cattle and stuff, they got to take out those feet, and those long legs with that big body sometimes makes it hard. But as they develop in a strength program and that length becomes not a liability, but your strength, and you're moving like a smaller built person, then I think you see that change. And that's when you see those guys really, really develop, break tackles. I don't want to tackle a dude who puts on 30 pounds in college and is 6'7" and is trucking. No, people don't want to tackle. I don't care what they say, unless you're a Ray Lewis or, some of the guys we were talking about before the show and back in the days, like, these guys are just so raw. They're growing into their frames. You think of it like a baby giraffe. Once that giraffe gets in their frame, that's a deadly animal. But that baby giraffe is still kind of learning how to walk and everything like that. But yeah, he's got a chance to be a deadly animal. So does Robert. So does Booker as well. And but yeah, these are the body types that you're seeing them recruit, and these are the guys who you see on NFL rosters down the road if they develop the way that they can.
Love it, man. One more we're going to talk about quick. Mason Posa. Let's go down to Albuquerque, New Mexico. Let's go down and look at the 6'3", 220-pound outside linebacker. And we talked about this a little before. It's similar to Thomas Heiberger, right? Super athletic, just demolishing people, but also playing really, I would say limited. I'm trying to get about not great competition, right? There's plays where I'm watching him cover slot receivers, and I'm like, well, it's hard, but the athletic tools are there. Thoughts on Mason Posa?
I really like him, and I think the more I watch him, the more I like him. I have this, we talked about it at the show. My dad coached at New Mexico at one point. I've seen the high school level of football at Albuquerque. Yeah, you worry about it to a certain extent, but you're playing against the guys that you have to play against. You don't really have a choice, and so if you're dominating the competition that you're playing against, that's all you can do. Okay, and then to be in New Mexico, to be a guy that nationally people are going there to see him, like, that costs money, that takes time, that takes resources. I think it says a lot about what people think about him from just the overall coaching level. In my eval of him, I mean, like, he's just big, and he's a state championship wrestler, I think 2 times. And what does Fickell love? He loves wrestlers. And this kid, he's going to be tough. He's a wrestler. All right. So then you add that to the equation. You watch the film. He's got the length. He's so disruptive. Like, you see him blow through people. He excels coming off the edge. You see him make plays at every level. You talked about him covering a slot defender. I've seen him play at safety and make plays, play at linebacker and make plays, play off the defensive edge, make plays. So he's making plays at every level. He's shown that he has the ability to do that. So you love that about him. Kind of like Tackett Curtis was, he was playing safety coming out of high school. He was playing, back in the woods in Louisiana where there's some dudes, but so you do worry about the level of competition. But the thing that I love about him is he's a great schematic fit, not just a great football player. He's got range. He's got the length to get in throwing windows. He's explosive at the point of contact. He runs through the ball carrier, and then he's always looking for more work. I remember one play where he runs through somebody blocking him, runs through the ball carrier, and then he wasn't done. The ball pops out, picks it up, runs for a touchdown. Guy's always looking for more work. It's kind of like offensive linemen. I never want a guy to go 1 for 1. Like, you took your responsibility out, go and wreak havoc, hurt other people downfield, and I like that. He just, he's a sideline to sideline guy, just a great scheme fit. They're going to ask him to rush the passer. They're going to ask him to play some coverage. They're going to ask him to get in throwing windows. He has the ability to do all of that. I think he'd be a great player if they land him. And like I said, just a great scheme fit. So a lot to like there. From Albuquerque to the Midwest, the last Albuquerque to Midwest superstar, Brian Urlacher, turned out to be pretty good. So we'll see how that works out. But yeah, no, big fan of Posa. The more I watch him, the more I like him.
Yeah, I agree. I love the instincts he has as well, right? He has a great feel getting his hands in passing lanes. He understands drops in zone, making plays all over the field, times up his blitzes really well, right? There's not a wasted step there. So I think instinctually that translates. And it's almost like if we talk baseball, like a 97-mile-an-hour fastball is a 97-mile-an-hour fastball no matter where you're playing. Whether you're playing at the Catholic Youth League or AA somewhere, like, that plays. And I think his athletic skills play. All right, so there's a bunch more official visitors coming up, but I'm not going to keep you all day. I want to get you out on this one because you mentioned it a couple times. Max Steinecker. What makes him different?
He's a visionary. And that's I didn't realize when Max and I started talking when he was at Cincinnati, because I would do their commitment videos for a lot of the kids when they were committing. And so we just, the thing I loved about Max is like, he would reach out to me and he'd ask questions and like get to know me. He's a relationships guy. But then once you start talking to him and you see the way he ticks, like this kid is beyond his years. He is a rising star in the college football profession. He's got a GM type mentality. He just gets it. Like he is as reliable as they come. He is a master marketer. Like he looks at this like he knows how to market. It's an ability to he has an ability to market the program. He has an ability to think outside the box. And then he has a head coach who trusts him to do what he is best at. And that's building relationships, doing things that are outside the box. And he's a great talent evaluator as well. Wisconsin is very lucky to have him. To me, sky's the limit. I love talking to the guy. I learned he is young. People don't realize how young he is. And I learn stuff from him all the time. And I think he's one of the best in America, hands down. He really is. Wisconsin's in great shape, and I think recruiting is in great shape because of Maximus. And every time when I was interviewing recruits, without question, every single kid I interviewed that went on a visit to Cincinnati or went on a visit to Wisconsin, back when I was at Rivals, Max came up every single time. There's no question about it. He makes you feel important. He makes you feel like they're the smartest guy, not the smartest guy, the most important guy in the room. And he actually cares. So he's got it's kind of like you talk about a football player. He has all the ability. Mm-hmm. He's got the smarts, but then he cares and he shows people he cares. And so he's got all the intangibles as well. So sorry if I embarrass you, Maximus, but you got big things in front of you, man. I'm excited for Wisconsin to have him and hopefully to have him for a very long time.
No, that's awesome, man. That's a great look behind the scenes. I think Badger fans are really going to enjoy that. All right, he is Clint Cosgrove, the great Clint Cosgrove. I usually do these for about 30 minutes. I've kept you for an hour, my friend.
That's because I talk forever.
I was trying to get a word in at some point, but no. It was great. It was absolutely phenomenal. Like I said, we get people on this show to make people smarter, to make myself smarter. I think you more than fit that bill. Where can people follow your journey? I have your Twitter account linked down there. If there's anywhere else people can kind of follow along.
Yeah, I guess I am Clint_C now. Changed it a few times now. Had a little fun with my Twitter name, but yeah, I've been on a little sabbatical. I'll be back. I'll be active. I've got a YouTube channel. I don't even know what that is. I'll be doing stuff on that. I've got an Instagram. I think it's still Rivals_Clint. I don't remember. They wouldn't let me change it. Instagram wouldn't, or Facebook. I can't remember. But sometimes I go on heaters and I have a good time on Twitter. I love interacting with fans. I love interacting with Badger fans. But yeah, just hit me up, call me out. If I'm in Madison and you see me, say what's up. I love talking ball. I can't thank you enough for having me on, Ryan. And hopefully I didn't talk too much and we can do it again.
No, it was phenomenal, man. I appreciate it. He is Clint. I am Ryan. Thank you so much for listening to Locked On Badgers on Wisconsin, and we'll talk later.